Okay, so we're just waiting on waiting on Stephanie.
Are you gonna pause that? Or are you gonna call the meeting to order?
No, I'm just, how do you pause it?
Should be a stop record button.
Did it do it?
Don't
Respect the culture. 100% right.
And I think I allowed Stephanie.
She's showing up there.
I know she had asked permission. Oh, there she is. Okay,
Okay.
perfect.
You can call the meeting to order. Just
Okay.
go
Okay, so it is 6:01. We'll call the Hazard Mitigation Planning Committee meeting to order. Stephanie, can you hear us?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good.
Great.
We have Craig with us. He is the North Hero Tree Warden. And Kenny are you still on?
I'm here.
Perfect. Tracy will be joining us shortly. He's running a little bit late. What do we have?
We got quorum.
We got one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had left it last month where we were discussing mitigation action items. And I just want to mention that I'm starting to review some of the newest plans that I've received from FEMA. And the way I had been formulating the plans prior is not passing muster. So they're getting a little bit more strict. So this is what you had ranked as your top 3 items in the newest plan, which is invasive species, ice, and wind. And taking a look back at the older plan, the 2019 plan, these were the top 1, 2, 3, 4 from the prior plan. And so what I still need to do is I need to kind of go through and cross-reference everything. And it appears that all the action items from the prior plan were based on these top 5. So we're talking culvert replacement, new firehouse, community education, critical facilities. Is that right? No. I'm looking at the wrong thing. I apologize. There we go. So yes, culvert replacement, community outreach. So it pretty much lines up with your current plan for the most part. So it's going to be a balance because there are items in the past plan that the town decided not to profile. One of them being fluvial erosion, and ice dams, earthquake is fine, rock slides, dams. You don't have any of those items, so I think those are going to be pretty straightforward. We'll still have to profile them, or at least give them space in the plan that the town acknowledges them. So I just kind of want to give you the heads up that this will be a process.
Okay.
Going back to the items that we listed last month, did we want to I don't know if you have to formally approve them in this meeting, even though we discussed them in last meeting, because I don't think you had a quorum last month. Is that correct?
Correct, we did not.
Okay. So, in the new items, a lot of these wind, ice, and invasive species, I think really tie to tree management. I think was one of the items that we discussed last month.
Yep.
So I didn't know if there was any more background information.
Well, I think that's why Craig is here, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So Craig, we had talked about partnering with GMP to manage tree trimming and right-of-ways. And I didn't know if, is there a tree management plan that's been
No,
formulated for the town?
nothing's been formulated yet for the town at all. Tracy and I going to be working on a hazard tree best management practice for all trees. But emerald ash, they're more of a crisis, kind of separate from those trees because they're imminent. It's kind of a different ballgame, but otherwise, Tracy, we've talked today for a couple of hours there. So we agreed to, work on a kind of a boilerplate of an SOP that is pretty well standardized across the country, either with utility companies or highway rights of ways, how they deal with it. No use reinventing the wheel. There was a very one-page successful form that I had working with the V-Trans that was developed working with the foresters out there, and you basically assessing the risk for any tree along the roadway. And you get so many points. So it gets quite a few points just for being in the right of way period, because it's going to cost. If it fell in the woods, it's not going to be a big deal, or fell into the lake, it'd probably be great, but so it gets a higher score. And then we look physically at the tree to see what kind of problems that it would have that would make it more of a hazard. And then make a decision whether you're going to be taking the tree wholly down, or you might just have to limb it in situations like that. So it's pretty easy to do, to come up with a good hazard tree best management practice, or SOP, whatever you want to call it. Very functional. One or two pages that would have to do it there. On the emerald ash, one thing, probably this is with Vermont Electric Co-op here, and I've spoken with them, what have you, and they have put together, I think, a mitigation program. And today I spoke with the general foreman for V-Trans, he's in St. Albans, and asked them what they're going to be doing with the trees here going through town on Route 2. Similarly, what they're going to be doing on their, especially their secondary roads in Route 78 and through Alberg. And he showed me, and they went through it, and they're pretty much in the same boat as the utility company are, and that North Hero is, and the co-op is, that there are millions of trees out there, right? I did a windshield inventory. I put it here on the map of where they're at here. So my wife and I, about 3 or 4 years ago, I think it is, we inventoried everything, and it's all documented and was given to the state. And we have a mapping of where every ash tree is within our right of way. So we counted over 900. So there's close to 1,000 trees at the time. This was 3 or 4 years ago. So it takes 3 to 5 years for the tree first to get infested till they're pretty well dead. And that's held true. You can see it right now. I mean, we had traps for 2 years. We set up here in North Hero, and and then a citizen found a tree just across the street here, the first tree, 4 years ago. And here you are 4 or 5 years later, and it is, you can count them pretty easily everywhere, so they're quite the danger. And what makes them particularly dangerous is that they're unpredictable. Say they turn into almost like a styrofoam cup inside the structure of it, and they can just explode out. Generally about 2 feet off the ground is when they'll break, and then the whole thing can fall. And usually you can look at a tree and say, oh, it'll lean this way or that way. They're very unpredictable. So if it's in the right of way, it could go either way. So we would, just assuming that, even though they're not all dead right now, I counted 100 from a windshield inventory. So that's just driving along, looking at those that would likely away. Doesn't mean, and there's another 100 at least there. but eventually it'll be all 900 plus
Yeah.
trees that will come down. Not all of them will fall in the right, some may fall on private property or what have you,
Yeah.
but, so they're there, but just assuming that you got 1,000 trees out there, ash trees, and they're all gonna die. Most of them, Tracy's been cutting stuff, they're either grouped together and they're maybe like a 2 foot diameter, but there's 2 or 3 clustered. It's hard to come up with an average price because they assess like, well, we'll call that one tree. Or they, if a arborist comes or a crew comes, they save like $400 just by coming together, you know, get a bigger job, and not have to keep mobilizing come. So you can get a little savings there, but then there's added costs if you want the grinding, the stump out completely, or if you want to haul the stuff off, you know, what's going on there, sign packages for safety. So there's other costs. So it gets expensive. So Tracy this year gave me all of the trees that they cut down this past year. And there was 5 sites there, just putting them together, you're closer to $30,000. And you really only bought Tracy, well, the total trees altogether, it weren't much.
Probably 10 trees, right?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, 10 trees, you know, so 2,800 average a tree. So even at $1,000 a tree, you're talking $1 million. So when it comes to, say, for instance, I think here, with the co-op, they had figured out. Oh, sorry, excuse me, look at my notes here, yeah, they had 150 million trees. So they have a big issue, right? 750,000 within the right of way. So theirs, and then I talked with V-Trans too, so what are you gonna do? V-Trans said, it's so bad that we're just gonna plow them, so they're gonna fall. And all we're gonna do, we're not taking any proactive stance, we're just gonna, they will fall down during a windstorm, whatever, when it happens, we'll treat it just like it was a big storm that came through, and we'll push it out of the way. We just don't have the resources to do that. And their plan here and their mitigation plan for them, they also said that, you know, for that many trees that they couldn't take them all down as big. The number 2 cost for utility company is veg management anyway. So there it goes. The whole budget would be gone. So what they have is a good plan of action here, and they'll, I think we could model that for there as far as their mitigation is that, excuse the pun, but like triage. What trees are going to really be imminent that they would harm somebody, you know? And then whatever kind of budget you'd have, you would address those. Some of it might just be limit, so it doesn't happen right away, you know? That cost alone would probably eat up your whole budget there too, to get that. Then the other will be, they'll fall down and you'll need the money just to clean them up off the road, to get them out of the way. And for doing that, but even most people will tell you, and I will too, it's always better to be proactive. Let's go out and do it ahead of time, right? And set aside, but there's so many and there's so much, there's no way you could afford to do that. However, it costs 7 times more to remove a dead ash tree than it does when it was healthy. So if there's healthy ones out there, still right, it's better, it's cheaper to take them down now. Because they can charge you more, because they won't touch the tree. They'll use all buckets to do it, or they'll use large equipment to limit down sections and take it off. I think it's worth exploring maybe some alternatives where they can take them down in large groups. Like the state is using a forestry mulcher on the interstate only. They work really slick, just takes the whole tree down, done and over with, you know. I could look into that. I think I talked with a state guy, and I think he told me it was one of the arborists that one of the companies have one of the mulchers, and maybe get at least an idea of what the cost would be if a crew would come in and they go, okay, you got 1,000 trees, we might charge you whatever, $6,000 a day, but I mean, you really compared to like Tracy just said, you know, we only spent for a few trees this much money. But I realize, you know, money is still, you might not even have that much, but at least you can explore the options you have. Here's one that, the other is that it caught when this mulcher comes down, it's like a big barrel with spikes on it, eat it all up. It's dangerous because all their stuff flies out. So the state's not gonna do it, even though they have one, they'll use it on the interstate effectively, but too many homes, so many cars going by. But here, it probably could be controlled because you can section off the road, it's not that busy. Make sure the property owners know, you know, what's going on, keep it away, and it might, you know, possibly be a feasible way to do it.
I talked with Bill Bear and he said like in Grand Isle, their approach is more section at a time. We'll just, here's a section of the road, we're gonna cut all our hazard trees and then we move on. And that's another approach too. However, I think you still gotta address the most immediate ones that aren't in that section. Like, gee, we had a windstorm last night and it fell down.
Yeah.
I think Tracy and I could go out and inventory and I could talk with the co-op and say, they have that information. A friend of mine works there and informed me on their schedule. Okay, when you're gonna be here. On Abenaki Road alone, there's several large ash trees there, 5 foot, 6 foot. You're talking maybe compared to what the prices here already, you're talking over $40,000 there. So that's out of what you would have to do because they don't want you near those trees. Rightfully so, very dangerous power line. That's a utility company. So you could start, we could go back over our roads again and go, okay, there's so many lines of, that'll come into the plan. There's X amount of 19 miles of roadway or 34 linear miles either side, this many trees, but the power company they'll deal with so many miles of it there. Then you'd look at the others and you could locate where they're at and say, well, now we'll spend our efforts here. Part of it would be either take down trees completely or others is just piecemeal at pruning the hazard trees, you'd be able to go out and do it. And Tracy and I talked about it, and I had asked the state, Tracy, earlier too, if they had a bucket truck or maybe at the auction, we just aren't into it anymore. We're pretty much contracting out to do most of our things on there. However, I think it's worth exploring as much as you could do, Tracy and a worker themselves, if you could do, particularly the smaller trees and limbing. There's a lot of trees on those ash that you probably in-house, Tracy, we talked about it, could probably do themselves, for doing it. And you'd either have to rent that equipment, to come out and do it, or you might, see as a capital expense and go, maybe we should explore, buying a bucket truck ourselves or something, if that fits into your, budget or not. But when you look at what it would cost to hire others to do it, and not taking down big giant ash trees and giant poplar, but just a routine, things that not now, but forever, you're gonna have. So every time you run out, and Tracy has to take the time to run out and see, coordinate, get people, get contracts, get the bidding, blah, blah, blah. Before some of that stuff you could just bang, if you had the crew and the right equipment, you could go out. Tracy was telling me that he's already explored this, for the higher trees, you're gonna need a bigger truck, where you can reach 80 feet up, not just a few feet. However, you might explore the possibility where the bigger truck that could be multi-purpose, there could be another plow truck plus a bucket truck. So you get more bang for your buck out of having that extra vehicle, that it isn't just for the trees, but you'd be independent from doing it. I think talking with the state, they agree too. We wish we could do it more on our own than contracting out. Very, very expensive. Go ahead, Tracy.
Well, there's several things with like getting a piece of equipment. It's like I was saying today, if there's a little downtime in between other things, we can go outside immediately and address some tree issues, right? Boom. Okay, if you get a snowstorm blowing in, okay, now we're going to focus on clearing snow or whatnot, what have you. Same thing during summertime. We get caught up on lawns. We get a couple days extra during the week. You can focus on trees. This, especially with the Emerald Ash Borer, is going to be a long-term, ongoing battle. So I think it's worth looking into as far as, getting a piece of equipment, see what we can do for grants or whatever, to do that, take matters into our own hands and go from there.
Yeah, exactly. As much as you can, to get that there. That would be a good idea.
As you said earlier, you contract it out, you get 5 trees, and that pretty much eats up your budget for the entire year.
Exactly.
Then, as we spoke earlier, have another high windstorm come up. Obviously, that's unforeseen.
Right.
There's not necessarily monies to facilitate that. So,
I think you always have winds here, right? So it's a given that you're gonna have a lot. I know my power's out a lot, so, and that's usually what's the case is. It's just so many trees in the utility lines. When I worked previously with the state, we also had 12 linear miles of right of ways that went to airport beacon lights on different mountains all over Vermont. And
I used to go and contract other people to do it, and then we use our own state guys and compare the prices. So sometimes it's appropriate more to hire a contractor, and other
Sure.
times it's, so it's a mixed bag of them all, not all of one or all of the other. I think you just kind of combine it when it makes sense. Certainly when it comes to the most dangerous parts, let the professionals get in there and do it. Don't steer us around utility lines and things like that to do it, or any kind of climbing. I wouldn't get into that, but I think a mixed bag of contractual things and doing that. But one thing I just like to address what you have on your agenda so you can deal with it on the education part of it. So I was on a committee for quite a while. We disbanded last year on education. We had the signs up all over. We did the tracks. I think enough of that went out and disbanded. I think the people know about it and everything. So now the next part is educating it's happening now. So I think I'm glad to work with Tracy and with you, with the groups here to educate the public on that. Like, what is the town going to do? What is the state going to do? What are the power companies going to do? What's the onus of the private property owner? What are liabilities? There's urban and Vermont community forestry. There's legal expertise from the Vermont League of City and Towns. So there's a lot of questions and they're very confusing around trees and stuff when it comes to the legal part of it, but there are lawyers that pro bono or whatever already that could help you when it came to some issues on the legal part of it. It's very muddy on trees on the legal part of it. Anytime you're dealing with trees, and if we're out there and something is happening, Tracy showed me the one outfit here, the fellow showed up. So he's a certified arborist. And for whatever reason, it does come to a legal thing, you do have to have a certified arborist on board. I won't be able to verify a forester. I mean, even though you have the knowledge, it's generally be a cert. So it's nice if you are hiring a crew, a company, even though the guy might have great knowledge, can do the job, might even do it cheaper. If it's kind of nice to have an arborist on board, because now he gives you that added benefit, for the public. The other is that I found, my wife and I went and inventoried everything. I took just a little laser to see what the right of way would be from the center line of the road, right? To get as close, and many of them fell on the border of big trees on private property. So you'd have to come to a decision. How do you figure out who's going to pay for the half of the property owner and half for the town, or does it go one way or the other, then if the property owner chooses not, it's a different ballgame. So again, on the legal aspect, I don't generally, people have been out there flagging a lot of trees and I see it on their property. That's good. It looks like they're taking their own ownership to it. I wouldn't encourage them to.
Joe and Brandy yourselves.
Because what you're saying is, I see something now that's dangerous. You tagged it, now you're not doing anything about it. Now you're liable because, well, you're not taking care of something that you knew was very well dangerous. So now I think it's going to be accepted that it's unusual. It's happening all over. I don't think there's a big legal issue aware of it. Any tree cutting down, we don't have a shade tree ordinance here. We have no ordinance, anything going on here in North Hero. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because we don't have big ground greens and what have you. It's rural. Every tree that's there hasn't been planted by the town or by anybody generally. They're right-of-way trees. So it's not really required to have something to cover those types of things. But nonetheless, you would like the people to know what's going on. So you're not required to have any kind of notification. If Tracy goes out there and cuts down a hazard tree, as long as it's a hazard tree and it's a danger, you don't have to give any kind of notice to the public. However, because there are going to be so many down, I think it'd be good in some format to be able to inform the public, be aware that we are coming. Or if you see these trees down, it's for a good reason. They definitely are down. However, the town does not have the resources to go on your property and cut your trees down, or even spend time with your trees.
Right.
If you have that problem, though, there are resources with the state of Vermont, the Vermont Urban and Community Forestry, and they will send people out, or if they can, they'll help you with that information. So I don't have the time. I wouldn't be doing it either. I wouldn't be going to private property and say, let me help you out with your trees. That's not what's going on. Just to be aware, the other thing too, last year, they changed the rules in the state for the statutes, and I brought them here. So now the onus on the trees falls totally on the select board. So the tree warden has no authority to do anything, but he works as an agent for the select board. So any trees to be cut would be you and Tracy, then you tell Tracy, it deals with it, and I can give you technical information, but legally I have no involvement with it. It'd be totally with the select board, decisions about. So if the town has an issue with a tree, why did you cut it down, whatever, they would come to you, but I could prepare you for that, answer those questions when they come, and they're legitimate questions, you know. Well, from what I've seen so far, most people want a view of the lake. They probably won't mind a lot of the trees going down, for it, you know, and a lot of those trees, the cost it would be, is beyond them to even afford to take them down. So we're just gonna have to accept the fact that, yeah, they are there and they may fall in our road, but Tracy does, you know, review of his roads and he can kind of stay on top of it, it's gonna become, that's pretty well gonna happen, you know. So it's a good, still a part of an educational, I think people are aware of the problem, but now it's like, who does what
Yeah,
for it, you know, on it, there. And again, it's so unusual and there's so many, you just don't have the money for doing it. It's again, it's back to triage. What can we do? The most immediate thing to help with it. And then if anything's removed, Bill Barron tells me, unfortunately, people are still hauling wood away. That's infested with those beetles and they're just still carrying them everywhere. So we have to decide, the town, do you chip it up and on the spot and then just spread the chips around the area? Do you take just big log lengths, maybe bring them to the transfer station and just dump them and let them rot right there, you know, to do it? Property owners, I just recommend keeping it on your property, use it, good firewood, you know, or if it's viable before it's even dead and diseased, cut it down now, very valuable wood. I've been telling that all along, like you should do, I did it on my property and I culled it all out, I just been burning it as firewood, great firewood.
Yep.
And then even some of the ash that are remaining haven't been infested yet from, because I took out so much, so the beetles get out, and if it's real easy and there's a tree right next to it, they kind of like, hey, I'm gonna go here, because they only fly around within a couple miles, you know, they're slowly through there. And then this spring, they're gonna be coming out pretty soon again. Next batch is gonna, so we still want to contain them from leaving the island as much as we can. So I think we had talked about that earlier in our discussions, is maybe the transfer station might be a good, just a dumping ground for. I was hiking up here, hadn't talked with anybody in Forest and Parks, but I noticed they were real aggressive on, in the North Hero Park. Holy moly, I mean, large, they just cut them all down, and fall, rot there and do their thing. Like I said, if a tree falls down the forest, nobody hears it and it doesn't fall, then it don't harm nobody. But in the highway department, you're gonna hear it bad. It's gonna be dangerous, but again, it really reaches a crisis type point. I know I drive Route 78, and you probably do too if you're going there every day. And I just look at them. If you look at near the islands and the refuge, those large trees there, I mean, they're imminent to, that's a very dangerous place. People are gonna end up in the river, you know, and they're gonna fall. Alberg is a very serious stretch there. And here at South End Road is probably the worst for big guys. Abnaki Road is really some really large ones, and I pointed out where they're at and the ones that are most, you know, but a year from now it could be even worse, you know, it just goes on and on, but we can kind of keep track of that. But yeah, but as far as the trimming, I have some guides that, you know, Tracy and I can work on and get, here's what we do for trimming, and here's our as far as a hazard mitigation, certainly could come up with something like that there. Partnering with the power company, I think, you know, we could coordinate with them on, you know, they're usually in a 5-year cycle, so they might say, hey, we'll be here, we're gonna take those trees, don't worry about it right now. And but if there is a storm, you know, they're gonna be right there to take care of it at the time. So I think that's very doable also. As far as even though it's not our trees, I think people are gonna wanna know what's V-Trans gonna do as it goes through town, you know, and we can coordinate with them too. And, you know, say, hey, you know, what's going on? Are you just gonna wait and blow them off the road? Or if someone made a call, are you gonna take them out? You know, they could answer. He said that you could call them and, you know, if you had any questions, and Kenny answered some of the public's concerns about, he's the general foreman responsible for.
Okay, yeah, I've spoken to him.
Yeah, nice man.
Yeah.
You know, and very good bunch here, and they, of course, they got their garage here in town too, you know, so, and they have equipment for it, you know, and, you know, a lot of this is signage, you know, traffic, the safety, just to keep people, sign control, things like that, when you're starting to work on it there, so, up out there. So we got trimming the trees, and we got that down, the veg management plan. I think, if you'd like, we put together best management practice and then
Yeah.
put that down there. Power company, I think possible snow fencing, mitigating. If you want some advice, if it's doable, I don't mind, I would work with you in doing that. So I have a willow tree nursery. So my nursery, I no longer use for doing that, I use those plants for soil bioengineering. So I'm retired, I don't do that. However, I still have a bunch of healthy ones there, and where applicable, I'll be glad to donate the plants to you, but they're living snow fences. So what's nice about them, you plant the willows, if you gotta have enough room. But you can use these in some situations, and New York State use them more for that reason. And as you get closer to the Pennsylvania border, you can see them. They're the same shrubs that I grow. And what they do is they're deciduous plants. So rather than having an evergreen and it gets really tall, and they work like you've had a big spruce tree, but it takes years to get it. And meanwhile, where they're little, the snow actually comes up over them and dumps everything there. So with the willows, you plant them, they grow to about 30 feet tall. They're multiple stem. They're tolerant of everything, and they're tough. But which they call it a fetch area. So what it is, there's so many multiple stems, and if you can squeeze in 2 rolls, it just, as the wind blows, it catches them in there, and then it gets caught in the rolls, and then you get in there. So it's a living stone. They're attractive, but you do need enough room to catch that snow. If you don't have enough room, and then the snow fencing or something like that could help you in those areas. But you don't see too much. Maybe on a bridge or something. Not too much snow fencing, literal fencing they put up anymore. But if there's the opportunity, I'd be glad to work with you on that, and I'd be glad to donate the cuttings. It's something you have to do in the springtime. You take the cuttings and very easily, and then you root them into the places, and it takes you several years, but they will, after 3 or 4 years, they grow very quickly once they're established. So that's something I'd be glad to work with you on like that. And the same thing there. I've worked for many years with the Natural Resource Conservation Service. So what we did is develop the whole specifications. There's a whole litany of what you need to do, specs to it. It's been around actually in Vermont since the 1940s, using these plants, and they've done well. And I planted them. The nursery's Birdland Conservation Nursery. I had worked with the conservation groups in St. Albans, and what they did, we planted them along 5 miles, linear miles along the river. And now if you go back and look at them, you'll see them. They're mature. What they did, they catch all the fat from the river, all the debris too. So each year when the river floods, it stops it. They root like the dickens. So what you do, other than just a cutting in the ground, you put it in linear like that. So what we did, you get a bundle of them, you get like a dozen plants, and they make about an 8-inch diameter, and you got maybe 10 good poles. So these big poles, you tie them and you put them halfway in the ground, and then you cover them. And then rather than having one plant come up, at every node on the plant, and there are dozens of nodes, is a new plant come up. So you have a thick, and they work very, very wonderful. But it's all depending on the site, which is applicable for where it might work or not work. But I could work with you on that. The green algae is more of aquatic type thing, probably, you guys are on top of that for doing those other things. But I had gone to some training here recently from the town and asked me to go down there to Montpelier. And the person there, that forester, there's a host of other insects are headed this way too. So we're gonna get done with the emerald ash borer, and I trust you, there's gonna be more. So it's good to have a plan down there. And I said, the money is finite, you don't have it, but it's still good to know if money were to come your way, at least you have a plan to do it. There's any grants, and there's nothing out there now that I know of exists, but if you do have a good plan, right? And then if people are gonna give you money, they'd rather give money to somebody who knows, I'm gonna use it wise. And we would do it this way. And generally a requirement for any kind of grant money is that you do have, do you have a plan?
Right.
And I think, I'd be glad to work with you on something like that. But as far as I know, we're on our own north here, and everybody is. And I think if you just take a common sense approach, everybody would understand and educate the public about if this is pretty serious and it's going to be happening. You can expect a lot of failures of electricity. We're going to have a lot of outages because these trees are going to be falling down. And they're, and on the roadway, they have to be patient that either the state or the town. It's gonna be a while before we can just jump on
Right.
something instantly.
I think even the education on just being aware that they're going to become dangerous,
Mm.
especially for their own property, because before I didn't even know I did not know what a infected tree looked like until
Right.
Tracy pointed out, and now I can't not.
Not,
Right, yeah.
yeah.
And and then it's very.
Yeah, USDA puts out a lot of these bulletins and stuff, and I'm sure we could get a bunch of them.
Yeah.
You know, get them out, you know, to the people.
I just worry about people maybe mowing their yard and, limbs dropping and getting hit by a limb.
Yeah, they're called widow makers, and
Yeah.
they're all over the place. And the same thing, I hike at Ingle a lot and go to Butternut Hill, and I look and, a lot of people, when they're
Yeah.
in those kind of areas, like I know the Nature Conservancy, no, just let nature take its course.
Mm.
And you look up there, yeah, but you're inviting people to walk on this trail. And they're gonna fall on them, that's dangerous. You really need to address at least those. And if it falls just in the woods, that's fine. Let it rot and do its thing. But there is a hazard tree, and I know, sometimes people view the people who cut trees down like, but there's no good and bad about trees. Trees are wonderful if they're planted in the right area. But if you think about it, I would guarantee you that all the right-of-way trees in all of North Hero were naturally occurring. Nobody planted them in there.
Right.
And so
Right.
nature put them in there because that's what it does. And so, you just, you're not the bad guy because you're taking a tree out. You're trying to save someone's life that do it. I wouldn't recommend replanting anything in a right of way, because in the future, you're gonna be putting more water lines in,
Mm.
possibly, underground utilities and stuff. It's such a narrow right of way and so dangerous. I'd leave it open. Don't put it in. If you wanna do trees and put them in areas that probably would be more, would be, whether it's a cemetery or the library or, other places we have.
Mhm.
That we could do something if someone wants to plant trees, or whatever. But I certainly wouldn't recommend them in a right of way
Right.
to plant them. It was just not a good place to.
As a safety aspect, that's where typically all the danger is going to come from. Is the very top of the trees, the canopy that dies off first. As you're saying, Brandy, the safety of people, they're not going to look up. It's not going to be the tree that's falling. It's going to be the hazard. It's going to be the 4 and 6 inch size branches.
Exactly.
40 feet up in the air is going to cause that.
Bill Barron could attest to this. Bill was just pruning one time trees, right? And Bill, by the book, right? Cuts the trees down, look at it, you assess the tree, where it's gonna fall, what dangers, you look for dangerous limbs up there, right? You got an exit plan. He did everything by the book, everything falls, and one little branch, he says it wasn't about that big, hits the ground, jumps up, hits his elbow. There goes his elbow. I mean,
Wow.
they are it don't take much
Yeah.
for falling limbs to come down there. So you're right, Brandy, educate them, like, be careful. These trees are extremely dangerous. Even while you're mowing, you're going by them. I mean, they could just, I wouldn't say gonna pop out, but they could just fall out. They're gonna fall down sometime. And
Right.
the odds are in your yard that you're gonna be there, and something's gonna happen, and the homeowner has to look like, gee, is that gonna strike my home? And, maybe it is worth it to have some come down. Right now, again, I get back to triage, cutting them down. Before, what could we do to save a tree? Well, even then, you're talking, if you had a nice big tree and you had a row of trees and a beautiful ash, you got the money, and you can't replace those trees. It'd be worth, you just can't. You can't just go out and buy a 8-foot diameter tree. But it costs them probably around $300 a year to maintain that tree from using the chemical.
Yeah.
Right, but it might be worth it if you got enough money to say, I want to save my tree. It's also an insecticide. Not everybody's comfortable about using insecticide.
I think that was one of the questions, was how that around the lake shore, injecting the trees around the lake shore, how safe that is.
Right, so you got the issue of using I believe it can be done, but still, it's not feasible at all to the town to be doing, to save any tree like that. Homeowners have to evaluate it on their own, and it has to be less than a quarter of the tree has died already. So if it's beyond, say, a quarter of the tree, then it's not worth, you're wasting your money
Yeah.
to do it. And it's only so many people have the license that are allowed to do it. So from the safety, anything you do, and the same with coming up with a hazardous tree plan, or I'm sure anything you're dealing with, everything's a risk assessment. So you just got, what is the benefits of doing this versus the risks associated
Right.
with it? Property owners could make their own decision, but for the town, there's something you couldn't even think about. It's just too expensive.
Yeah.
It's beyond our capability even to deal with the dead tree, never mind saving a tree, anything like that. It's more, it's definitely like, I think they explained today, V-Trans said, it's more of it's just gonna be a tree. How do we deal with almost treating it like there's a storm? Now we're coming in just to clean up because nature
Right.
is gonna take care of it, you know, but.
Yeah.
You know,
Ken, do you have something you
Take
want
up
to
all
add?
your time, but, yeah, go ahead, Dan.
No, it was good information, which is what we were looking for.
Well,
Yeah.
good.
And I'm glad to hear you're working with our rec department, because that came up, that we do have, extensive network of nature trails, and there's a lot of ash
Yeah.
trees along the
Yeah,
nature trails.
in my other life, I had worked with Chip,
Yeah.
so years ago, wetland, the other thing, I had a wetland nursery also, so
Yeah.
I'm into
Yeah,
wetland plants
so-
and things like that, and we did work together already. I went and we, into Ingle, and we cut down those trees there and looked at them. So here's some hazards. They did a great job in there. There's still a big maple. I'd like to see a little bit more.
Well, those are the ones around the building.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
talking about the trail. I
Oh,
mean,
the
if you go out the trail, and a lot of people use those trails.
Exactly,
There's a
yeah.
lot of.
Be glad to work with the rec department
Yeah.
on that too, go in there and, it's a different ball game going in there, to do it and stuff, but, certainly take care of it so
Yeah.
people don't get hurt in the rec,
Yeah.
rec area there. Sure, that'd be a good
Great.
thing to do.
I have a
Ken,
question.
you want to add something, Ken?
Well, yes and no.
Yeah.
40 years ago, I was deeply involved with the Champlain Valley ash industry. And so ash trees have been in my life for a long time. Personally, we pay an arborist to come every year, every 2 years. There are trees on our property we've elected to pay to save.
Yes.
Between, I'm going to say 300 feet, 400 feet of my neighbor's property, we've cut almost 40 trees over the last 15 years.
Sure.
My question to the group is, do we have any really nice examples of an ash tree that are within the village proper? And if so, I think rather than wait for it to become further diseased, if it isn't already, because that's kind of, you had a window of opportunity to save a tree, and after that you lost. But if we have a really nice example along the village proper, I think there's some wisdom in setting aside $200 a year to inoculate it. That's all.
Yeah, well, Ken, there is, it's not there, but get back to the recreation trail. There's a beautiful white ash at Camp Ingle. And they're less susceptible than the green ash, but they could, and that would certainly be one. It's gorgeous right there. And then what's nice is because the library does a good job of informing everybody a little story as you come along. And that could be included as the educational thing. Well, here's a big one. And then I'm the same way. I have, most of my property is, about half my property just goes into the swamp, to a forest floodplain, right? So they're gonna die naturally in there. But I did have about an acre, which I have a lot of ash, green ash, but I also have few oaks in there and a lot of shagbark hickory. But I culled out the ash that were infested and the leaners, the small ones, and I, culled it down to where I have less ash. And they're healthy. They're fine. They're looking beautiful. Haven't been hurt yet. But as I get into the swamp where no work has been done to cull out the others, they're all dead and stuff. So there's some hope, Ken, there for some, but getting back to you as a property owner, that's your right and your money to spend. But I don't think the town can afford to do that for the trees.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying if there's a really nice example, and you just identified one at Camp Ingalls,
Yes.
but if there's one that's in the middle of town, maybe we round up the resources somewhere. I don't know where.
Yeah,
And
no,
say,
sure.
this tree is worth saving and it's worth inoculating. That was my only point.
I agree with you. I've worked for the state for like 28 years and I've traveled every state highway all those years. And I've always admired the old American elms. And you can still see those that have survived, and they're just beautiful and just got lucky that, having. So it's, even though, we might not have a lot of them, it's nice that we could save a few of them. And a lot of them, and I think we've talked about this on other groups that I've been involved with, is that usually there is some kind of resistance out there somewhere. So there's 1 or 2 trees, whatever it takes to be, and they can clone
those trees, and they start, you know, like with Liberty Elms and things like that, then at least there's some future, so you don't lose all of that of the ash, you know, beautiful ash trees, because, well, I think probably 80% of all the ash in Vermont, I think the total number in the state was, got the number in here,
In the tens of millions.
1.5 million, I think, trees or something like that. So, I mean, if we can save just 1% of them, that would be wonderful, you know?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Ken, if you see one, or Tracy, if you see one, or if you guys check this one out and you like it, let me know. I'll pitch it.
Sure.
My next door neighbor is currently saving 6
Yeah.
ash trees.
Yeah.
Exactly what you said, $200 every 2 years per tree.
Yeah, sure. If if you can do that, that's fine, then that may go along from there. It's a new thing. People really don't know, well, what's the deal on it there? But like I said, right now, there's just so many and more in just the safety aspect of it. And it's kind of,
Okay.
but it doesn't mean, I know like the city of Rutland, if you get bigger cities, they might do that. I know like they'll, with the elms, I think there was a Liberty elm, I think they were trying to, so they have a nursery and then they grow the trees, and it's no guarantee, but the likelihood they might be more resistant to Dutch elm disease or whatever, so that's one component of that. But for most of the things that Tracy's gonna have to deal with there, you aren't gonna have time to plant no trees.
Yeah.
Craig, is there any like foreseeable next bug that's going to come along that maybe kill the maple trees?
Yes, there is.
Oh, don't tell us.
Yeah, I hate to say that. I didn't bring it to you. I didn't want to go into a whole bunch of other stuff, but yes, there is.
Well,
Unfortunately, there's a lot. There's
mitigate.
one, well, there's another insect that was, while I was working with the state, I found that they were a plant on the interstate near Mallance Bay. And it's a shrub there, and it's a beautiful moth, real pretty moth coming in, but it's coming in the state, and it's ravaged through Massachusetts, and we're pretty much gonna be here too. So there's one after another, right? You just have to deal with it, but you never know. I think about, it's been 40 years ago that I started with the state, when at the time we had pear thrips for the maple trees. And that was, quite the issue. We thought we were gonna lose all of our sugar maples and what have you. And it's nature just ran its course, raised hell for all those years, and then they disappeared. We're fine, but we learned a lot from it. But there's always going to, with insects, there's always going to be things. In the trees, it always depends, even what's being attacked now. When we put up those traps for attracting the beetles, what it was a chemical made, a man-made chemical that imitated a tree's stress, that the tree was dying. And so insects will attack a weak tree first. So your trees are going to go out there, and if they're usually weaker in a roadside salts. We got compacted soils. It's not the best place to grow a tree. So they usually, the way they're going to get a new insect comes to the state, they look for the insects find the most vulnerable plant. How big is the tree? How long did it survive? How can it fight off? It has a lot of natural things that it can do to fight off disease and whatever. Some of the stuff is just aesthetic. So I think in the past few years, more so over in St. Albans area, you've probably seen it with the I think they call it sponge now, gypsy moths. And all over, oh my God, they're all gonna die, but they'll come back. But what a tree can do is like a human, it only can take so much. So boom, 1 year. If it gets it 3 years in a row, it's gone. But if the tree's real healthy and it can beat it up, but if you're a weak tree, boom, they're gonna go down. So those are aesthetically they're a problem, but not as big as a deal, but you could lose them all. We could, gypsy moths certainly are still around here, sponge moth, call them a different name, they're still gonna come back. Be here. And there is unfortunately a host of other invasives out there. And when you talk about the invasive species, I'd be glad to work with you later on some other issues. I was working with VTrans before I left and working with the Forestry Service, NRCS, a lot of people who was a member of the invasive species in Montpelier. And those are your herbaceous things like wild parsnip, wild chervil. Those are poison ivy. Those are all really horrible, and we have them here. And I'd be glad to work with all of you.
Is working on a lot of that right now.
Yeah.
At least on the property that the town owns.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
right,
so we've had some success doing that, and well, right near the big poplars that Tracy, cut down there at the curve on Peelot's there, they had a huge, somebody was experimenting or did a good job with, there was, what, bamboo. And they had not eradicated it, but it looked pretty good. That's another horrible plant. We're fortunate we don't have it here, other than a couple spots here, but there's some herbaceous stuff that I'd be glad to work with you on for when it comes to those, invasive, plants there, yeah. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad guys out there, but the plants aren't good or bad. They're just in the wrong place.
Mhm.
If you think a lot of our native plants that we love, in China, they're considered invasive. They got our plants over there. I think most of ours come from Japan.
Yep.
And you can't really blame the Japanese for doing it because, it's just they come on ships, they come, through, they make their way here, no intent to do it, and I think like the wild parsnip and things like that came right out of people's garden. I think they traced the wild chervil out of a gardener in Randolph, no, things are a great plant, they're beautiful, and then
Yep.
they're everywhere, so. Purple loosestrife was quite a big issue there for a while, and then again, just kind of like faded away. They had released beetles for a long time. Beetles were somewhat successful, what have you, but then it just seemed like nature kind of found a balance somehow. There's some plants I experimented myself with. I worked with warm season grasses and so if you're going to eradicate an invasive plant, a herbaceous, you have to bring in a native, but the native's gonna be really aggressive on the edge of being invasive itself,
Right,
really. I
yeah.
mean, too much of a good thing to keep out, because anytime you create a void, nature fills it. So when we cut out all these ash trees, might be some, I found in my woods, or you will find, you would do it normally as a forestry practice, you cull out the woods, get more sunlight, encourage healthier other tree. So you'll lose the ash, but I'm sure you're gonna get a lot of other coming in there, or there might be another seed source of ash returning again. They might never, ever make it to be a big tree, but hey, they're a tree, Or you might see maples coming in more, or some other oaks or something else, to fill that void that you had in there, but yeah, nature will always fill it in. Unfortunately, when you open that bare ground, it fills it in with invasives pretty, pretty fast. They're very opportunistic when fighting for that light and good soil and things like that. They take over. And now our parks there, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I hike also in St. Albans, Hardhack Hill and things like that. And you can see over there, they're doing a good job trying to help it. Oh my God, they got so many invasives on those trails. It's unbelievable. Autumn olive, you name it, a lot of invasive plants coming in. So if we can keep them, be proactive and keep them out of our rec parks and things like that, so I that's a different domain and we can do that. But for the highways, I think there's your man there and your crew to do it, and it's all about safety.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then the hazard there and so that's about it.
Thank you.
Well, thank
thank
Craig,
you.
appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
A lot of great information. So I actually have one follow-up question to that. When it comes to tree removal within, what is it, 250 feet of the shore? If you know that it's infected, do you have to still
If
contact
it's-
the state
if-
for that?
Yeah, you're talking about the Shoreland Protection Act. If the tree is dead, damaged, or diseased, you're allowed to cut it down.
You're also allowed to cut dead or diseased limbs.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Stephanie, because that's, we're along shoreline everywhere, and we have to comply with that rule too. Typically, I find that in the refuge, either the feds or with the state, if it's leaning towards the lake, they'd love to just see them fall in there and be a lunker log, and turtles love them, and it's good habitat. Let it go that way, but I believe that you're right on as far as long as same with the town, there's no notification. If it's a hazard tree, you can just go out and do it. It's on your property and it's a danger, you can take it on it. And again, they prefer though, if you were to cut it, just to leave it in place if you can. If it's along the lake, let it fall in the waterway if it's not a problem,
And I
But
just want to
I
make sure.
think one thing that might be helpful on the educational part is get a feeling, just most frequently ask questions, and then that way you can hand it out to people like the last as select board. I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of them, but maybe solicit, keep track of every time I've always done that. It's like, well, they're our customer. So what are the questions? And then as those questions come in and get an answer for each one of them, go, well,
Yep.
here's your question and this is how, we'll explore it. We'll have all the, if we don't have the answers, there's certainly the people we can find that do have answers.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I understood you correctly with V-Trans's approach. They're basically going to do triage as their budget allows. Is that a correct statement?
Right, they still do tree trimming, and things like that, hazard trees, they've always had like that, but with the number of ash trees out there, they don't have the resources to be able to go out there and cut every tree, individually and stuff, that more than likely, and then from what I've seen is happening, if it's gonna all happen, during a windstorm, they'll go there like a normal bad storm and clear the right of way and what have you, clean up the debris and whatever, but I don't think they're gonna take a proactive approach and go after every tree on the highways out there. But if you had any questions, you can call them and they could let you know, maybe what's going on. So for us, it would be the District 8 garage out of St. Albans there, and they cover this territory here and all the way to Burlington,
Yeah.
Yes, gotcha. But the power companies have a more proactive maintenance. Is that correct?
They always have, but they're overwhelmed with what they have now, so I'll go over it with it. So, just a quick note, maybe kind of describe it from their words rather than mine. See if you got there.
Corey, I just make the point that 2 summers ago, my neighbors and I had some ash trees by the power lines. We called the power company. They were there within 2 weeks and removed them. And they didn't charge us anything.
That's good, yeah.
So, but,
Yeah, they're,
but 2 years ago, we didn't have the same problem that we do now. So,
right.
yeah.
Public Works have done the same thing. If it's near the power lines, I call a power company and obviously try
Yeah.
to pass it
Yeah.
on to them. They got a certain right of way width of their power lines also,
Right.
which is
We had a tree that needed to be limbed up because it was.
Yeah, I think
pulling
what they
power.
told us is if the trees were within 10 feet of the power line, they considered it a hazard, and so they removed those trees.
right.
Yeah, what they've done, it looks like from their report, is they prioritize what they can do, what things they can be proactive on, and what others they're just gonna have to deal with as a storm happens there. So I think they have a pretty good plan, and we probably could do something similar, as far as, how in a mini scale. It's actually very doable because we only have 19 miles of highways, certainly less of a challenge than the co-op has or V-Trans has, for dealing it. So you can take a more personal approach to it, sure.
Right.
And again, I think the property owners are key too, because most of these trees are just side by side, us and them.
Yeah.
So we have a mutual agreement. A lot of these guys, mobilization is a lot. So sometimes maybe even if we were to hire contractors come in the area, you might let the neighbor know, hey, they're here. And it'd be cheaper for the neighbor to have that guy probably have his trees cut while they're there. And that might help out. So that's,
What about doing that with like Kyle or, if they have somebody out having leave?
yeah, if someone down there in Grand Isle says, hey, we've hired XYZ tree service to be here. And then, why they've mobilized to do it. Would it be cheaper for them that you'd have to discuss with them, the different companies. There's quite a few different companies. I see Xylem, the new company, they were working out there today, working on the secondary roads. I don't know who hired them or who's on. They call probably V-Trans. I hadn't asked them, but I've seen the larger companies out there, and certainly that would be a savings, but I'm not quite sure. I mean, they're out to make money. It's a business and not,
Right.
Right.
on there, it might be a separate thing altogether. Well, we're down at that island. I've asked, we always talked about it earlier when we were on this group that was EAB group. Anyways, like, gee, could we all get together? And no, it doesn't sing like everybody's singing the same song, but when it comes to the towns, like, it'd be nice. Let's get together, kumbaya. We're gonna get out there and we're gonna see if we work that way. It's too diverse, even though we're all the same county and everything. I think the budgets and the way people feel, the constituents are different.
Yeah.
Too, and everything. If you were to get on South End Road, and South here will probably be different than if you were out on the lake, you're gonna have more concerns and
Right.
things like that. So you kind of like keep it low key and put it down there. Yeah.
Well, thank you. That
Yeah, appreciate that. Very informative.
was lots of good information.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
I
Well,
took,
thank you
I
very
took
much.
quite a few notes, so it was very helpful.
I think that just moved up to the absolute top of our list now, ahead of ice and wind.
Yeah, because there's so many, it's
Yeah,
trickle down
yeah.
effect, you know? Yeah,
I mean, the ice and wind relate and it
Right.
compounds the problem
Yeah.
even more when you got dead trees. So,
Yeah.
and then you have to worry about, you know, EMS and fire being able to get where they need to go.
Right.
If trees are down,
Sure. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and people getting injured too.
Yep.
That's what I worry about. 'Cause you're right, people don't look up. They're just out mowing the lawn, they're, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah,
yeah, they know the tree's dying. I mean, you can
yeah.
see it, but not, you know, you don't think
Yeah,
about
it's,
it.
and again, it's hard to, I mean, some of them, you know, Tracy said he cut down a few of them himself and usually it's the canopy and it works their way down, but not necessarily that way. I mean, sometimes they found it's dead here at this part and the other part was okay. You never know with that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
generally look at it, they call it flecking. The flecking is where the bark's coming off,
Mhm.
and the pileated woodpecker's nothing. You'll see it, and when you see a lot of that, you know, you're pretty well. You're very well, and you know, the bark's all on the ground, you know they're gonna, a little bit harder to see it, but it's, exit holes are shaped like the letter D,
Mhm.
and that's where they come out of. And if you take like a knife, or you can take, there's a specific tool where you just take off the bark, and you'll look, and you'll see the emerald ash is, they're zigzag, like, you know, there.
Mhm.
So there might be there's tons of beetles, could be other beetles too, but that's characteristic of them guys, and you know that. You have a dead and dying tree there, that it's gonna be, there's no hope for it, it's gonna be gone, and
Yeah, there's one on 78 that every morning on the way home, I look at it, I'm like, oh, there's very little bark left. You can just see it, just almost flaking off, yeah.
yeah, that's, you drive along the road, and that's the same with, other than that. That's why we're working with Tracy, we'll go out there, and he's already done a great job on that. You just go out and you don't have to be an arborist. What you wanna look at is, what would somebody with no knowledge of trees just looks and go, that is a dangerous tree.
Mhm.
And that's what you go, yeah, there's that big limb, it's dead, and that's why Tracy, I think we're talking about later, thinking more long range. Other than the ash are all taken care of, now you just got.
Oh, right.
trees. Then you might be able to, you know, do it yourself, have a bucket truck or something,
Yeah.
be able to take care of the limbs, you know.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you could, and the other thing is saving the whole, well, I cut the whole tree down when it was just, trees have a great way of compartmentalizing. So if you have an injury, they seal it all off. They can, the whole rest of it could live fine. Some of these trees are co-dominant, so they've got one big branch going. It might look ugly aesthetically, but it's still a tree. It's still gonna shade. It still has value for animals, you know, so, you know, so if you're trimming, you know, and you have that thought, you know, you can, you know, evaluate a tree, take that risk assessment and save a lot of the trees, not just run around killing every tree because you couldn't reach the
Right.
top, you didn't have a pruner, you
Right.
decided to cut it down. A lot of guys, well, I can't reach up there, so I'll cut it down to the ground. Well, what a shame. All you needed to do was take out the problem,
Right.
you know, out of
Yeah.
it.
But I agree, I think it was definitely moved up.
Yeah.
so Chair. where you wanna go?
Developing an SOP as like a plan item, is that a correct statement? For tree
Yeah,
management
I
best
think so. They
practices?
put together, SOP, or now the buzzword is best management practice,
Yeah.
but, you know, certainly, a BMP is good too, because it doesn't commit you to an obligation. Right, because if you put it as a statute, I will,
Yeah.
then you didn't do it. So best management practice, I will try. If we're gonna do it,
Yeah.
this is the best way to do it, but it might not get done, you know?
Yep.
So I put that under plans and regulations, and then under structure and infrastructure, I put implement the BMP. Would that be a correct statement?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
So I
I
wanna
don't
be-
know if this necessarily applies, Stephanie, but we did create a line item on the budget specifically to address these ash trees. We did it last year and we didn't update it this year. It's at 10,000, but we'll probably have to update it next year. More money.
So that was.
Tracy talked about this earlier, and I think, the select board, for everything I think Carl had talked about having a contingency for other things. So there's always stuff gonna happen. And I think for that amount of money, for this year, like with the trees, few trees that Tracy did with, most of them weren't even ash, or poplar's another weak tree. It's not an invasive tree, but they're very weak when they get old, get 200-300 years old. Old time, they're ready to die,
Yeah.
right? They're out there, so you got a lot of them, big ones, just to have us, that budget alone, a little extra money, just to deal with those, not even talking about the ash. So each year, windstorm, you go, ooh, look at a big poplar or whatever, you'd have something to at least
Yeah.
do the minimum amount,
Yeah, that's far that what we've done as a town has just been preventative maintenance to whatever kind of tree that it happens to be. It's not been focused on ash trees by any means. It's just like as you say, Brandy, it's a safety concern of the town of what's dying, dead, and potentially going to come down and cause a hazard at this point. So the ash tree, the ash borer that's another different whole animal altogether.
Yeah, but that's why we started that line item was specifically for the ash.
Yeah.
Because before it
We
just
knew
came
that-
out of the general fund.
Well, y'all knew this was kind of going
Right.
where
We
it
knew
was headed.
where we were headed, so we wanted to start allocating funds in that direction.
Right.
That'd be-
Right.
but you can see it don't go far.
No.
No.
So,
And I mean, when we originally started, I don't think we really had
We
any
didn't-
idea of
right.
how much it was gonna cost to
exactly.
get people out here to cut trees down, so.
Yeah, I know, I talked with like Town of Essex, other people before, and so what did you, in Burlington, $100 a tree. I go, well, that's reasonable. For somehow, it's more than $100 now. I don't know what.
Yeah.
But like they said, it's, once they're already infested, then it's several times more costly just for
Wow.
cleaning up everything. So that could be a reason why that and inflation.
When they start to die, they get more dangerous.
Exactly. Yeah, any money you could throw, a pot of money there. I know you only have so much to go so far, but nonetheless, at least for the emergency stuff.
At number 7 and 8 on your plan here says partner with GMP to develop a vegetation plan. That should probably read Vermont Electric.
Yeah, it's like, I believe it's Belco.
Yes. We're not associated with Green Mountain Power out here.
Not about, it's,
Well, Vermont Electric, it still is a different entity than Velco.
yes, I corrected that.
Just for the
Yes.
transmission lines.
Got it. It's late.
Yep.
I think I had this somewhere else. Yep. So,
Yeah, you can, we could put together a hazard plan like that BMP. Well, I remember it was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
V-Trans put together they call it a pesticide use impact assessment, right? So I worked with the ag department, put together, it was like over 300 something pages. Whittled it down to about 12 pages.
That's plenty.
Because there's just too much
Yeah.
when it comes to some of the things that different groups want.
Right.
Realizing we don't have the resources. And to be practical, on the practical side, when I was out in the field, if you got something that's dog-eared and the guys are using it, it's soiled and dirty, that's a better plan.
Yeah, exactly.
But sometimes for big entities, they love more paperwork. They love that. So keep it simple, I guess, is what I would say for management plans.
I want to be cognizant of time. Do we want to continue and kind of review the actions that we identified last month at least? Or do we want to table that for next meeting? I can send them out for review and then we can talk about it, because then we'll also need to kind of fill in this table. And then some big items that need to be identified is things like who is going to be responsible for the action, the cost range.
Yeah, so maybe table, let us review.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe table it and then let us review it. That way we'll be able to come up with a plan.
Yep.
So I'll add the columns right here of the items that we need to identify, and then I'll send that out.
Great.
Sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Like a motion to adjourn?
I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Done.
Okay, so
We'll meet April 2nd. Is that great?
it's the first Wednesday. Is that right?
Yep.
The second is?
Oh,
I don't know.
I'm sure it is.
I'm trusting you, Andy.
Well, no, I'm trusting Stephanie.
I'm looking at the
Yeah.
calendar. That's the only.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, so.
Yes, so.
April
the
2nd.
As a citizen and a North Hero taxpayer, I appreciate all of your efforts and time. And
Thank
I will
Thanks,
say
Ken.
good night.
Okay.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, good evening.
All right.
Have a good evening, folks. Okay.
Hi,
See you,
Tracy.
Tracy, thanks again for all your help.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Thank you, Greg. We'll be in touch.
Yeah.
And hopefully our schedule will start freeing up a little bit.